if we ceased enforcing our financial policy on the rest of the world, then our money would probably collapse very quickly.
There's never been a government that wasn't owned by the rich.
If there's no store of value, then it's not a money.
They're selling you that we're going to do all this stuff and we're going to tax the rich, but it's never happened.
DJ Badger coming at you live with Dad Influence.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dad Influence. My name is Daniel. I'm the dad. This gentleman here is Adar. He is a founder of a community known as HeadOn that I've become a part of recently. And the community seeks to find peace between two sets of people who have had a lot of challenges in that regard specifically. So I've invited him on to ask him what he thinks about the whole situation. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and what exactly you plan on achieving with HeadOn.
Well, my name is Adar Weinreb. I've been Israeli American. I've been involved in the peace building space for a bit over a decade now. I think I'm going on 11 years. And around a year ago, me and my co-founder founded HeadOn, which it's not just a Discord community. We're actually building a platform designed to bring people from opposing viewpoints together for conversations. And the idea is to use AI to help people find common ground. So we believe that we found a way to scale civil discourse to millions of people around the world. But before we're currently building the product, which we're around 1 to 2 weeks away from launching, we're building this vibrant community who will be our first users on the platform. Right? If we build a platform and no one's on it, then what's the point? So we've been working very hard to really build and foster this amazing community on Discord that's Israelis, Palestinians, and voices from all over the world who are coming together daily for conversations, overwhelmingly in good faith, which is something that we rarely see in the Israel-Palestine space. And we've also learned a lot. So it's not just building a community so they can be our users, it's building a community so we can understand what product to build, what tools to build, what dynamics may come up in these intense virtual conversations, and how to build the right product for what we're trying to achieve, and that's really civil discourse. That's scalable.
I like it because to me, civil discourse is definitely something very important to me. I personally have a Facebook group that I moderate, and I started it kind of with a lot of those same kind of intentions. I mean, generally, I guess it's not as high stakes as a lot of the issues that you're working around, but I looked around in America and I see it, how much everybody's at each other's throat. And it's not even that they're at each other's throat because they really vehemently disagree, so much as that they don't actually understand what it is the other guy is saying. So there's just so much of, we spend so much time in our bubbles to where we don't take the time to understand what other people are trying to say before we just completely reject it. Because there might be a nugget of truth, or it might be the whole truth, and you've just completely ignored it. Because personally, I've gone through a lot of changes. I just talked about it on the last episode. I personally was hardcore neocon, let's make sand glow guy. Like I was cheering on Ted Cruz when he said that once upon a time. But about 9 years ago, I was like completely radicalized by the great Scott Horton. I read a book called Enough Already, where it just really went back to the Jimmy Carter days and explained how a lot of this stuff just keeps snowballing, and it's a back and forth, and it's just, there is a way of achieving peace, but it has to come at the cost of domination, if that makes any sense. And it has to come at understanding each other and realizing that just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to fight. If
Right.
that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome that you had a transformation and that a book was able to do that. I think that's beautiful. I too did not always see the world as I do currently. When I was 18, I actively decided to move to Israel and join the IDF. I didn't have to. For me, conscription wasn't mandatory. I was a U.S. citizen. I grew up in the U.S. Most of my family is Israeli, and so is my father, and he put it in my head from a young age that the way to support your country is to serve in the military, the way my father did, the way my uncles did, the way my grandfather did. So it was always in my mind that I might do it, but I didn't have to. And then when I turned 18, I left my hometown in New Jersey and I moved to Israel. And 3 months later, I joined the IDF. And I never hated Palestinians. I wasn't taught to hate them. I was just taught that we need to fear them and defend ourselves against them. And interestingly, I had a moment on base when I was guarding that helped transform my views. I was guarding and there was a poster on the wall showing different Hamas training techniques. And there was a photo of a Hamas member crawling through sand. And I'd been crawling through sand that very same day, and I looked at him and I saw myself in him, in my sworn enemy. And I asked myself, I said, wait a minute, if I was born in Gaza, could that be me? Does his family view him as a hero and me as a terrorist? Is that possible? Now, these thoughts didn't change my views overnight. This is deep-rooted fear-based teachings that I had from the time I was a kid, but it did plant a seed. And then in the years after the IDF, that seed that was planted grew into something very different, and I came to understand that the biggest difference between me and my sworn enemy is simply the side of an imaginary line we were born on, and had I been born in their shoes, I would view the world as they do, and that does not mean they deserve death or harm. And we need to find a way to humanize one another, and that's the path forward. So that's what inspired me. It started there on base, and it was around 5 or 6 years after that moment where I started getting involved in peace building. But I remember that as a profound moment that began to shift the way I see things. And then I started getting involved in activism with the goal of really humanizing both sides.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting story. There's a lot of people who join the military because they want but to go to another country. I mean, I know that that's where your family's from, but still, to immigrate to another country specifically to join that military, and then to completely change to the other, like it shows a really big flop, I would say. And it's something that I've kind of been thinking about. Maybe you can expound on this. It's something I've said as like, I don't know if terrorism is even a good term, really, in a way, because truthfully, it doesn't seem like terrorism is ever really intended to incite terror. It seems like it's more intended to incite rage, if that makes any sense. And I think if you start to look at it from that angle, you start to see where this stuff comes from in both ends, and why both ends kind of see it almost the same way, even if it's a state doing it rather than a person, because it's indiscernible if it's happening to you. Whether it's like, well, they went through all these hoops and these bureaucracies and all this, it's completely indiscernible. The way that this happens is I have this rage that has been generated, and I don't know what to do with it but make you feel that same rage. And I think that is something that's happening from both ends, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And, I think it's probably good that we should try to have terms to describe different aspects of reality. But the way the term terrorism is used, it's very much politicized, right? So when the United States invaded Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, that's just war. Is that the moral implications of the U.S.'s actions in Iraq, in my opinion, are worse than 9/11, as horrific as 9/11 was, just because of the sheer scale of it, the sheer number of people that were killed under false pretenses, people who I think we all agree should have an inalienable right to life, got their right to life taken from them under false pretenses. But that's war, and that should be forgiven. Oh yeah, we made a mistake, we thought they had WMDs, but that's something very serious to do, to invade a country and kill hundreds of thousands of people. Now, generally we reserve the term terrorism when it's Muslims doing it for whatever reason, and we see this in the U.S. right? There's some meme going around. If a black person murders somebody, it's gang violence. If a white person murders somebody, it's a lone wolf attack. If the police kill somebody, well, that's just them doing their duty. But when a Muslim kills somebody, it's terrorism. So there's something very political about how the term is applied. And for that reason, I often reject the term. I like to talk about actions and what are the moral implications of these actions. Are these actions that are okay? Are they in any way defensible? If not, then we shouldn't do them. And I think that's a better way to go about navigating the world.
I've seen that you've also faced, because I watch you talk smack on Twitter. As you've said, you're a little more aggressive, but I don't attack you for that. I'm also a lot more aggressive on Twitter. But
for whatever reason, yeah, I'm generally a nice guy, and on Twitter it brings out the asshole in me.
I get real. I'm not necessarily mean. I won't just outright call people names and just be abusive, but I definitely turn into a pretty big smartass. So I definitely I get it, but I'll say that this is a question that I've written ahead of time, was that you have faced criticism for working towards peace, and how do you stay true to that mission, and what does that teach kids about standing firm despite pushback?
Yeah, so I definitely get a lot of hate. I get hate for doing things as simple as humanizing both sides. When you humanize somebody's enemy, you become the enemy. But that's relatively minor hate compared to what I get when I criticize Israel. I think of all the former IDF soldiers, there's very few that are speaking, actively criticizing Israel the way I do. I know you just spoke to Shael. Shael would be another example of somebody who's been very critical of Israel. But people don't like this, so I get a lot of hate for it. But I don't do this to be loved, you know. I don't do this to be loved. I do this because I find it to be important. I derive immense meaning from, fighting what I believe to be the good fight. And, it's not that I only get hate. I get a lot of positive messages as well. People message me all the time telling me that they're transformed by this content, and this is messages I get from people on both sides. Israelis and Palestinians are supporters of each, telling me that they've been transformed by consuming this content, or the content that I do. So that keeps me motivated, right? If I only got hate and I didn't see the impact of what I was doing, then I would lose a lot of motivation. But the fact that I see that it is actually having an impact motivates me to continue to do it.
So definitely focusing on the love is always a good way of getting through life in general. You gotta find the small rainbows.
Exactly, and also knowing, people online are nasty. Some will give me affirmation, some will be nasty, but I know who I am regardless of what people online tell me. I have real friends in the real world. That's like my support system. As long as you have that, if you have a good group, if you have a community, a good group of friends, then what happens online doesn't have nearly as much impact on you.
I definitely agree. Yeah, like I said, I've gotten, maybe it's for me. I'm personally a libertarian. I guess you understand American politics a little better than most. I'm used to being hated, and I'm used to being disagreed with. It's nothing new for me. It's been that way for decades. So, I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm desensitized to it. So when people kind of come at me and they're like, "Oh, you're a Nazi," I was like, "I've been called a Nazi forever, and I still can't figure it out." Libertarianism is the diametric opposite of Nazism, but somehow that ends up being like.
It's just a bad word people use. Yeah.
So it's just like at a certain point, I'm just like, I don't care anymore. Call me the names you're going to call me. I know who I am, and the only people's opinion that really matter to me 100% is my wife and my two sons, because those those three people are my world. And like I said, for me, that's what really motivates me is I know how much my kids mean to me. So I look around at what's going on, and these, you know, I don't know how I would deal with a lot of what people have to deal with, and I wouldn't even just confine it to just this conflict. I mean, I've been screaming about Yemen since, you know, Obama. So like I really think that this is like we have to figure out a way to make sure that kids are at peace. So what do you think is probably the greatest what kind of solutions have you come up with in your travels and activism and talks? What kind of solutions have you found that would make sense for just general the MENA area?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so the general MENA area, I think U.S. foreign policy has been quite destructive. It's been a policy of supporting regime change, often through brute force, and very rarely are these countries better off when these regimes fall. If it happens naturally, if it's an uprising from the people have the right to do that. The U.S. should support the will of the people. But I think the U.S. foreign policy should be one of peace building and cooperation. Invite people into the U.S. sphere of influence. And I think you have a lot more leverage over a country if you were in cooperation with them. So, for example, right now, Iran and the U.S. are, for whatever reason, enemies. I'm not convinced they need to be enemies. The U.S. should be working to build ties with Iran, to build trade with them, to have them be part of their sphere of influence with no force, simply with negotiation and an attempt at cooperation. That's how I would change U.S. foreign policy. No bombs, no bullets. There's really no reason for that. Second, if I zoom into Israel Palestine, I think we need to be really dedicated to the peace process. Both sides, but we haven't had a formal negotiation in nearly 20 years now. No attempt at a negotiation in 20 years. There's been ceasefire negotiations, but not a negotiation to solve the conflict. And when people do not have their rights and they don't see any path to achieve those rights, violence generally ensues. So you currently have a situation where you have around 6 million Palestinians living in the land between the river and the sea. Around nearly 2 million of them are citizens of Israel, and they're quite happy with their status, though they would like to improve certain conditions. But there we have a relatively good solution. They're well integrated into society. They make up 20% of Israel's population, but they're 50% of doctors in Israel, interestingly. Now, but you have around 4.5 million that are neither sovereign nor equal, whether they're in Gaza or the West Bank. They don't have equality, and they don't have their own sovereignty, and they don't have any clear path to how to achieve that. So when that's the case, you fall into despair, and you are much more likely to engage in acts of violence. So the status quo as it's currently maintained will always produce more violence. It's unsustainable and immoral. So Israel needs to understand that we will not oppress them into loving us. We will not oppress them into accepting us. We need to be actively dedicated towards a peace process. And we also need to understand that rejection is going to be part of this peace process. Because when you show up to a piece of land en masse and claim it for your own, it's very hard for the native population living there to just accept your presence and to accept that you will now be sovereign over a significant portion of the land they were once living on. Right? This is part of the false framings in the pro-Israel narrative. It's like, the UN offered half to us and half to them, we accepted, they rejected, so we're the reasonable ones and they're just violent. No. Rejection should have been expected. No population in the history of the world accepted something like that. Now I get it, we come from this land, we've had a continual presence of this land. To us, Zionism is an indigenous rights movement. But to them, it's indistinguishable from settler colonialism, and they're responding to us as all people before them have responded to settler colonialism. You respond with force. So peace will not be easy to achieve. Rejection will be part of it, but we need to stop seeing rejection as irrationality from them or somehow attributed to just Islam. No, it's a very natural human reaction. Rejection should be expected. Acceptance requires immense work. We've not put in the work. So I want us to put in the work by any means necessary and get it done. And we have an opportunity. The PA, who in Israeli society are seen as not all too different from Hamas, which is just a result of government and media propaganda, because they accepted Israel's right to exist in 1993, and we've had security cooperation with the PA for decades now. They haven't launched a single attack against us. They've worked with us to prevent attacks against Jews, and yet we've done nothing to reward them for their moderation, and we've kept them weak and isolated. So we do have a partner for peace. Is it an ideal partner for peace? Probably not, but no one is. We need to work with what we have, and we're not doing the work.
Yeah, that's honestly one of, in my opinion, the biggest mistakes from the Israeli government is the fact that when you've had this moderation from Palestinian Authority, that wasn't jumped on like white on rice. Because if you see this situation, like if you're seeing this situation from a Palestinian perspective, if it was me, I'm looking at, the Palestinian Authority basically just letting them trample across us, and we're getting nothing for it. And then I'm watching these guys, quote unquote, courageously standing up to them, and also getting nothing for it. But it's like, am I going to lay down and die, or am I going to go down fighting? Is basically what your choice is from that perspective. And then you wonder why the fighting idea starts to really gain steam. I mean, it's the same reason why that fighting idea gained steam in the early Israeli immigrants to because they were fleeing the pogroms of Eastern Europe, and they were fleeing the Holocaust, and they were fleeing all of this intense discrimination. So they felt like the world had, consistently presented them the option of lay there and take it, or, die fighting. And so at a certain point, it was like, we need to let go of lay there and take it, and just solely go with die fighting if we have to. And I think that there's something that needs to be recognized there, that like a lot of the reason why I think you have this 20% population of Arabs in Israel who aren't running around doing all this crazy stuff is because there is something to lose. When you create a situation where, there's no hope to life, then death cults will spring from that. This is exactly what we saw in Weimar Germany that caused the rise of Hitler. Is there was just so much despair to life that it's inevitable. And like I said, that's not a justification. Again, like as I've said from the start, that's an understanding, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and it's something that Israelis fail to realize. We think that their hate for us is somehow inherent and unchangeable, and we just need to accept that as eternal. So, and this again, the same reason why Palestinians are led to violence, because they're hopeless. Israelis too lack a vision for what peace looks like and how to achieve it. So the Israeli left in Israel used to be much stronger. There was a movement to solve the conflict. But after a few failed peace agreements and enough terror attacks, Israelis said, you know what? What can we do? There's nothing we could do. So we're going to support for those who will just keep us safe. It's, I would say after October 7th, the amount of hate for Palestinians increased significantly. But before that, most Israelis didn't hate Palestinians. There's more so apathy. They were apathetic. If we need to occupy them, if we need to oppress them for our own security, fine. There's nothing I can do to change it. It keeps me and my family safe. I would prefer that than having terror attacks. If I knew how to solve a conflict, I would support solving it. I just don't really see how to do it, so we'll maintain the status quo. That's the mentality of most Israelis. October 7th got Israelis to say, wait a minute, the status quo is not good. It's not acceptable. So it moved most Israelis more to the right to say, okay, we need to change the status quo, but through more force and more violence, not change the status quo by recognizing that violence comes from lack of peace and finding a way to achieve lasting peace that doesn't require oppression or an increase in violence.
I do plan on having Adam on, and I know he's more the expert in this game with the AI, if I'm not mistaken. And I was going to talk to him more in depth about how AI can be used basically for good. But I would also kind of want to know what kind of tools do you see in general? You know, mentioning AI as one that I know that you guys have talked about, but what kind of tools do you see being used in the future to kind of facilitate this peace and intent and better dialogue that's going to work, I think, better than some of the moderation that we have currently and some of the tools that we're using currently that are quite flawed, as we've seen in our own discourse in the U.S.
We're rolling it out in a week or two. The first tool we're going to have is simply a real-time conversation summary that is telling people what has been said, what has been agreed upon, what are still unresolved issues that still need to be discussed. They'll then also encourage people who join the conversation to continue it at a further date so they could talk about those unresolved points. So we're now at a situation where, or the situation we're creating is when you join a conversation, midway you could see what's been said, so you're not left in the dark. And also, you don't need to start over every time. You can continue from where you left off in future conversations. That'll be the first two features. A, the summary. B, the encouragement to continue it at a further date. What we're working on building over the next year is many things, and I'm sure there'll be ideas we haven't yet thought of that will come to us from the community and from trial and error. But one of the problems we have with virtual conversations is people talk over each other, and then the conversation just becomes unenjoyable for the viewers and listeners because you only have one audio output, so you can't talk. You don't hear more than one person. So the AI will be able to identify when people are talking over each other, and it can mute everybody and let one person speak at a time. It could stop the conversation, say, "Okay, guys, we're gonna chill things out a little bit. Person A, the floor is yours. You have 2 minutes to share your position. 2 minutes will pass. Thank you, person A. The floor is person B. The floor is now yours." And maybe we even have a system if person A isn't finished in 2 minutes, the viewers can decide to vote and to extend their time. We'll make it fun and interactive. But at least this way we stop the interruptions and allow people to share their position and make the conversation more enjoyable and productive. Also, there's people who have a lot of truly interesting perspectives, but they're not as assertive as some other people, so they don't speak because they're always getting spoken over. So this will give those people a voice as well. Another feature we may have would be essentially steelmanning. It could identify a misunderstanding in both people's perspective and say, "Person A, can you please explain the position of person B?" "Thank you, person A. Person B, can you now explain the position of person A?" This, we believe, on its own will have a tremendous impact in people's ability to understand one another. Another feature could be means of de-escalation if things get really heated. How does it de-escalate? Does it do an intermission and show a funny video? Does it show puppies running around? Or does it do a breathwork exercise? The AI will do trial and error and figure out over time what the best means of de-escalation is, but it will learn how to de-escalate. And then another feature that I'm personally very excited about is solutions. So the AI is going to seek solutions. It'll hear both people, or both sides, and then present a middle ground solution and ask both sides to comment how they feel about it. Based on the feedback they give, the AI will be able to iterate on that solution and then present that iterated solution to different groups of people having similar conversations, and over time build consensus around solutions and constantly iterate based on the feedback it receives. So that's something maybe I'm most excited about, because I think a lot of the solutions to our problems, either we haven't thought of them yet, or there's just not much conversation around them. And I think this will help us.
Interesting. I was just saying that last one, you honestly might be onto something deeper than just a discussion for chatting there. That might be something very useful for like states, Congress, trying to iron out issues in a bill. They'd be like, well, I really don't like this part. What if we change the language to say this? Well, would everybody be cool with that? Okay, well then we'll just do that.
Exactly. Yep.
So, and then if they want to sit here and be dishonest and say something that's gonna just skew the AI and not give you what you want.
Yeah, the idea is that over enough conversations that we'll be able to understand what at least the majority want and see what the outliers are. But I believe that often people, their beliefs aren't as deep-rooted as many think they are. And we don't know where their belief comes from. So if you ask somebody, what solution do you want to the conflict, they might say 2 states, but they might not know many other alternatives to 2 states, right? They might know either 1 state for all people, and that creates demographic concern, or 2 states, which is separation. So they say 2 states. But them saying 2 states, is it because they don't have other options? Does it come from a place of security? Does it come from a place of believing it's the most just? We need to get to the bottom of why people believe what they believe. And just a poll of, do you support 1 state or 2 states, that doesn't get to the bottom of their beliefs. It doesn't give us enough information about what drives this person's ideas and beliefs. So through deeper conversations that AI will be collecting and learning from this data, I strongly believe we'll be able to come up with new solutions and build consensus around them. Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly... maybe you can shed some light on this, because it's just a curiosity. I don't understand how a 2-state solution would work with the level of rivalry that there is, and the fact that the 2 pieces of Palestine would be landlocked from each other. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. Like, U.S. has Alaska, which is separated by Canada, but we're friends with Canada, and there's still an ocean to get to it. Like, how would you have any kind of freedom of movement between the 2 pieces?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and what's been proposed in the past is that there will be a high-speed railway between Gaza and the West Bank, so that it's relatively simple to go back and forth without creating a security risk for Israel. But I do think that a 2-state should be in the form of a confederation. And maybe it will take time till it's a true confederation, but a confederation being the way the European Union is set up, where you don't need a passport or to wait at immigration to go from France to Germany. You get on a train and you could just go from one place to another. That should be if we go to 2 states, that should be how we envision it, a confederation. And I think there's a mutual interest in both sides having this cooperation. It would be more secure, right? If we are in ties with one another and have cooperation, both security and economic cooperation, this will decrease the chance for violence, because nations in cooperation lose a lot more when they're at war with each other. It ruins the economy, it ruins security. So we have a mutual interest in this cooperation. Additionally, I think economically it's good. If Palestinians can get working permits and come to Israel proper to work, they'd be getting a higher salary. For us, it would also allow us to, bring in labor for lower cost. I think there's economic benefits, there's security benefits, there's social benefits. So we should strive to have a confederation. Now, a confederation in its purest form won't happen overnight, because you're always going to have some percent of the population that are not okay with this 2-state solution. What happened during Oslo? Hamas did not want 2 states. They didn't want the PA or at the time the PLO, to make these concessions and acknowledge a Palestinian state. So they essentially ruined it by carrying out terror attacks and suicide bombings. You're going to likely continue to have this in a two-state paradigm. So as long as there are some percent of the population that don't accept it and are willing to engage in acts of violence to stop it from happening, we can't have a fully open border. And without a fully open border, it's not a confederation in its best form. So we need to understand that there's going to be different stages to this confederation. At first, there will be security. If there's a high-speed railway from Gaza to West Bank, no issue there. But for Palestinians to come in Israel proper, there will be security, there will be checkpoints. There's no way to avoid that. But over a generation of peace and reconciliation, we could certainly achieve that. We need peace for long enough that people forget what they're fighting about. Those who don't want to accept a two-state today, after enough time of peace, they will accept a two-state. I don't see any reason to believe that once we have peace, once Palestinians have some form of justice and equality, that they're going to ruin all of that and wage war against us. Some extremists might, but it'll be a minority, and that will be an amount of people that can be contained through mutual security cooperation.
Yeah, I actually completely agree, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with the Arabs that do live currently in Israel, and what you see in New York City, like you have the little China, the little Mexico, the little spots that are and the Israelis and the Palestinians, from what I understand, all live in the same area. They go to work together, they shop at each other's shops, they all are able to get along. But some, and the reason why is because, like I said, there's an economic that's more of my expertise, is the economics of things. And in economics, we have something that we call opportunity cost. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with opportunity cost. Yeah,
but yeah, the opportunity cost of war in general and conflict in general is insanely immense. You have young men that are dying in large numbers, and women nowadays, but that are dying in large numbers. These are people who could be discovering things that are really important, like HeadOn. This is kind of the point, that is like, these are really good, important things that could be discovered. There are people that are wasting their time, in my opinion, figuring out new ways to kill people and destroy things when we could be building and creating. And so, like, that, there's a huge opportunity cost when you spend money on war that could be spent towards peace and prosperity in general. And this is something like the Confederation idea that you said. I mean, it's basically what was done in the U.S. as well. And you might end up with because originally the U.S. was a lot more like the EU is, and eventually became more of a federal system. But a lot of the reason why they couldn't have such a tight formation in the beginning was because a lot of these people had a lot of disagreements about what they wanted to do with their state. And I think you're going to see a lot of that same thing happen in Europe over time. And I think you're also probably going to see the same thing happen in the Confederation with Israel, Palestine. And I think that you're absolutely on. I think there's something to like a one state solution that's a confederation, where we're like, no, like it's everybody's allowed to live here. Everybody has a say. Everybody has a, and this is the state of Palestine. This is the state of Israel, or province if you're from other places. They're both, a state. They work together. They have the same military together. They have the same, government leadership together. They work together, but they have their own local way of running things. So you don't have to worry about, somebody killing everybody on either end.
Right. Well, so Yeah, you're describing something slightly different. You're describing a federation as opposed to a confederation.
Okay.
So a confederation would be the European Union. A federation would be like the United States or Canada or Switzerland, where it's one country with provinces or states or
Well,
cantons.
I was referring to the Articles of Confederation going into a federation.
Okay,
does that make sense?
You're saying over time turning it into a federation.
Correct.
Yeah, because I think one state, as we normally talk about it, is too simplistic and likely won't work, and two states, as we talk about it, is too simplistic. I like to think of the confederation as it's a more advanced and evolved version of the two states, and federation being a more advanced and evolved version of one state. And those are the solutions I like the most. I think it would be easier to start with the confederation than with the federation.
Right.
But a federation, yeah, that works. It's one country with more localized autonomy. You have maybe the parliament is by default 50% Jewish, 50% Palestinian, as to not create this demographic battle between both sides. You have a system of checks and balances and a constitution that can ensure protect people's rights. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, it's the thing I've said before. Like they're like, there's this problem though with demographics. It's like, yeah, we figured it out a long time ago in the U.S. It's called the Electoral College. That's how you keep one minority from overpowering a majority. We know how to do this. So I struggle to see how that wouldn't work, but again, I'm projecting my own experiences onto other people, and I think that is generally what is always happening in a lot of these conflicts. But like I said, I'm really committed to trying to figure out a way to get to peace.
Amen. We really need all hands on deck. All hands on deck for this one. It's not going to be easy. So the more people working for a common goal, I think the better off we are.
So let's ask, what could people do to support what you're trying to achieve here more? Like from joining HeadOn, or what recommendations would you make towards trying to get towards the peace that people could actually act on, say, tomorrow?
Yeah, so first of all, an open invitation to anybody who's interested to join HeadOn and start to be part of these conversations. Everybody's invited. So that's one. Two, I would just say, if you're interested in contributing to peace, then contribute to the humanization process of both sides. Try to foster a greater understanding between people. If you happen to be Jewish or Palestinian, it positions you're very uniquely positioned where you yourself, just by reaching out to someone on the other side and befriending them, can change their entire perception of how they feel about the other. Most Israelis have no Palestinian friends, and most Palestinians have no Israeli friends. It's much easier to support violence or oppressive policies against the people that you don't know personally. So these ties are immense. But this doesn't only need to be for Israelis and Palestinians. It could be, again, people all over the world. If you, maybe you're an outsider, you're not Jewish or Palestinian, you could still meet somebody on the other side, talk to them about their life, hear them out, and just try to inspire them to hear out the other side. Not in a forceful way, but in a friendly way. So and social media really enables this. It allows anybody to be a peace builder. Just through social media, you could find people on the opposing side of an ideological position, and you could talk to them. You could get to know them, and you could try to meet in the middle. So I would say this should go beyond Israel-Palestine. Democrats should be doing this with Republicans, liberals and conservatives, white Americans and black Americans. We need more unity in the world. We need more societal cohesion. So wherever you are, whoever you are, you have the ability to make a friend on the other side and change the way you view each other.
Oh, man, excellent. Like, I really appreciate you coming on and coming and talking to us. I know it took a little bit of your precious time, and you were trying to work on your OnlyFans, and I stopped you.
We'll get it up.
Any way to get to peace. Any way to get to peace.
Yeah, exactly.